the format is the first 30 minutes is will be a speaker, and then the second half will be open for sharing. And this is a very special guest and very dear to my heart because she's my sponsor. And she's been my sponsor for 11 years now. Can you believe it? It's been 11 years. And I tell you what attracted me to her and to her husband was their love and devotion for AA and for God. And that was attraction, and that's what we do, is we attract people by our love and devotion, I think. So without further ado, let me introduce Norma A. from Buda, Texas.
Hello, everybody. My name's Norma, and I'm an alcoholic. And I've lived in Austin most of my life, and Buda is about 20 miles south of Austin. It's kind of a nice country town, and it is so beautiful and peaceful here. And I just thank God that He moved us here. We really called it a move of God because it was not planned. It just happened, and all the spiritual dominoes fell into place. And Rosie was a part of that venture as well. But Rosie and I have been in service for all of those 11 years together. I was GSR of the Primary Purpose Group, and as a service sponsor, I said, Rosie, you're going to take a turn as GSR too. And I moved on to being the Treatment and Accessibilities Chair for District and then for Area. And I'm currently the DCM. And all that means is that there are committees in place that open doors of service so that we can provide the AA groups with everything they need and inform them about how to make everyone welcome. And if that means through accessibilities, or if that means through having service to treatment and correction, or if it means doing public information, which right now is pretty important, trying to reach out to those alcoholics who are marginalized. You know, where are the people that could be with us? Is there anything we can do? So what we can do is reach out to professionals who interact with alcoholics. So it has been a learning curve for both of us. Archives was another service arena we were both involved in, and it has been fascinating finding out exactly how huge the world of AA is. And we've had some phenomenal adventures in that way. And I've learned so much about who we are and how to keep AA. I really believe that AA is all about relationships between sponsors and sponsees, relationships between you and the home group, and relationships between yourself and God. And that's how it works, is through these special, Bill calls us a spiritualized society. We are different from the rest of the world in many, many ways. And it was my privilege to discover this as I went on my own journey of drinking and then sobering up. So my name is Norma, as I said, and I am your garden variety alcoholic. I'm an ex-drinker. My sobriety date is August 1st, 1983, and I'm currently a member of the Single Purpose Group in Austin, Texas, which my husband and I started that meeting about 6 or 7 years ago. And I really do believe that we get here on the wings of prayer and we're all miracles. That has been my experience. I came out of a very middle-class home. My father and mother were both very heavily involved in grassroots politics. It was really busy. They were part of the American Civil Liberties Union, and And I tell you what, I was licking stamps and being involved in political campaigns and fundraising, and all the people that are well known in Austin at the Capitol today were in our home. And I didn't know if they were like really important people, but looking back today, I recognize a lot of those names. And so, there was other things going on in my home too. And it was alcoholism, and it was the big secret that nobody wanted to talk about. And we kind of swept it under the rug. And as a child growing up in an alcoholic home, I was ill equipped to deal with the world. And the only way that I knew how to connect with people was with music, with my guitar. And I grew up in the days of the Freedom Folks, Bob Dylan, Janis Joplin. And I was always the one there singing, "The times they are changing," and the times were changing. And everyone would rally around the cause, and I never knew really what the cause was. I just knew that I wanted to belong and be part of things. And through music, I had found a way to belong. In my drinking years, I was a young girl searching and frequenting the 6th Street bars in Austin, Texas, before 6th Street was, a tourist place. It was Skid Row, really, is what it was. I was very depressed, suicidal, in and out of relationships with men of very questionable character. I seldom had contact with my family. I missed work a lot, and there really wasn't much hope for my future. And I would write about my life. I would write songs, and one of the verses of a song went like this: "The beer is turned to wine, the wine is turned to gin. My laughter turns to sighs, the good times, the good friends are memories, and all that's left to understand is the glass in my hand." And that was toward the end of my drinking, when I drank to live, and lived to drink. That was me. But what happened was, when I took the drink would take me, and I'd end up in sordid places with sordid faces, and my dreams in life were quickly fading. And I was around people that had only one thing in mind for, a girl from Texas. And I was a people pleaser to the max, and you know what that meant. I did everything. I was so afraid of being alone. I did everything I could to make people like me. And, I didn't really know anything else. If I had known different, I would have lived differently. But I was too desperate, and things fell apart. Periods of depression got closer and closer together, and I drank more and more. I can remember going to the bar and making a real fool of myself, and not knowing how much pity was in the eyes of those people watching me compromise myself. I'd go down to Lazenby, that was a local hangout where all the philosophers and students and professors hung out. And I'd just order a pitcher of beer and drink the whole thing, and then try to make it home. And I didn't want to feel the pain of my life. And I wrote about that too. Empty and alone, I finally stumbled home. Desperation welcomed me into her lifeless arms. And one time I went to the bar, and I was, going to go drink because another relationship had failed. And I was depressed again. And I go up to the bar, and they know me well, and they put a drink right there: rum, Kahlua, and pineapple juice. That was my drink. And I knew exactly how many drinks it would take to where I could feel no pain. And so I was not a tea sipper. I was not a social drinker. It was chug-a-lug, chug-a-lug, chug-a-lug. And, until I was really good and drunk. And I got on my bicycle, drunk, and I'm going downhill as fast as I could go, and it felt free. It was not free, but it felt free. What the truth was is my drinking was out of control. My bicycle was out of control, and my life was out of control. And I hit a car. It turned in front of me, and I ended up in the hospital with 5 stitches in my head. I'm still drunk, I'm still crying and carrying on, and I will never forget the looks of disgust on the faces of the nurses, the social worker, the policemen, and everyone who had to deal with me that night. And my life was just a series of lost causes, lost relationships, and lost dreams. And there were times I wanted to die. I made a few suicide attempts. Those failed too, which I'm glad of now, but you know what Bill Wilson wrote. It is truly awful to admit that glass in hand, we have worked our minds into such an obsession for destructive drinking that only an act of providence could have removed it from us. And I know that coming to AA was not an accident. It was God showing up in my life. I had been in an AA room before because my mom sobered up 8 years before I did. So I would, go to the club in Northland, and I looked up and saw the 12 steps on the wall, and I saw God right in the middle of all those steps, and I thought, man, I guess mom has just got religious in her old age, And just like Bill thought about Ebby last summer, an alcoholic crackpot, now a little cracked about religion, Now I enjoyed dating all the guys swinging in and out. We had something in common, but I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. I wouldn't have just walked into an AA meeting on my own. God had to meet me where I was. And I remember the time in my life that I had hit an emotional bottom. I was 2,000 miles away from Texas. I had moved to Richmond, Virginia, and things were going to be different there, right? It was the geographic cure. Well, things were not different because I took me with me. So the problem was still alive and well. I had a job, I had money in the bank, I had friends, a nice home, but, on the inside, I really didn't have anything. I would look in the mirror and desperation and loneliness stared back. So again, I down a bottle of pills. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I have tried living, and now I wanted to try dying because I didn't see the point. I was not happy. And someone found me and rescued me. And I remember just going through the motions. I was a little robot. I was eating, drinking, working. I didn't want to be alive. So what happened next was I'm in a pool hall playing pool with a friend of my sister's, and it's New Year's Eve. And I look at this girl playing pool with me, who I like, and she is not drinking. And I, said, "What? Why aren't you drinking? It's New Year's. Everybody drinks, especially me on New Year's, And turns out she's an AA. And at some point, she told me her story. And there it was. I began to question myself. I could no longer drink without thinking about it. I had the belly full of booze and a head full of AA, and it was just all over. And so, like it says in the 12 and 12, it was discovered that once an alcoholic had planted in the mind of another the true nature of his malady, that person could never be the same again. And it was at that point that I found an old low-bottom drunk club in Richmond, Virginia, and I became a member of AA. And that incredible journey began. But I didn't come to AA looking for God. I was running from God. I had been to church. I did not connect with church. I church hopped like I bar hopped. I was there for all the wrong reasons. And, I met some fanatics as well that just scared the devil out of me. But mainly, I just didn't think I could stand before God. I knew I'd broken all the commandments. I think I could write in a few new ones that I broke as well. And, didn't think that me and God were ever going to be able to have any kind of relationship. I never thought of that. I wasn't good enough. And I believed in God, but I put my faith in alcohol. You know, I had a lot of trouble managing life, managing things. I couldn't be around my family. I didn't have any real friends. The only time I prayed was when I got into trouble. And, but in AA, people would say, Norma, don't leave before the miracle. And they would say, expect a miracle. And they would say, you know, if you don't have a higher power, you can borrow mine. And I thought, these people are crazy. How do you borrow God, you know? But the other thing they said that was memorable is, Norma, the only thing you need to know about God is that you're not God. And there is a God. And so, you know, I had to keep moving on and moving forward. I made a lot of mistakes in AA. I tried hard to do things right, but you know, I didn't. I would attend meetings, but I didn't get a sponsor that I used correctly. I mean, I had girls I would talk to and talk to and talk to, but you know, there was no step work done, and I didn't really have that relationship with God that was effective, and you know, there was just too much going on. I attended meetings, I had the fellowship, I had identification, and I had some relief, but I didn't have recovery. And so, you know, it wasn't long before I'm back in the grip of obsession and I'm staring step one in the face. I hadn't found the solution the program offers. I was miserable. I was miserable drinking, and I was miserable not drinking. So I relapsed after about three and a half years of going to meetings. I made a lot of meetings. I was Miss AA, chairing meetings. I was being the treasurer. I was trying to sponsor. You know, I changed all the stuff on the outside. But that spiritual malady, the fear, the resentment, the morbid reflections, the self-pity, everything that, you know, we alcoholics suffer from, that resurfaced. And I didn't have what other people had. But I can tell you that I wanted. And I looked very hard for the solution. I wanted to find out, you know, what are other people doing that I'm not doing? And I would be listening to speaker tapes, and over and over and over, I would hear them say, work the steps, work the steps, work the steps. And I'd hear a lot about the third step prayer. And I realized that I had missed something along the way. There's an old AA saying, you can take the drunk out of the gutter, but how do you take the gutter out of the drunk? And so, you know, I began to change. I began to live a spiritual life. I worked the steps. I examined the fourth step and how fear had drove me in every area of my life, and things began to change. As it said in the big book, we may have had spiritual beliefs, but now we began to have spiritual experiences. And slowly but surely, I found how to turn my will and my life over to God. And, you know, before I had really done my best, and my best was not good enough, and it never will be, not without God. And it is through the 12 steps that I was able to find that power that I did not have before. And I found the solution: surrender, self-appraisal, and service. Over the next many years, I found a lot of other moments of surrender. I had the loneliness of unhappy relationships, but I found intimacy with a relationship with God. I experienced the great reward of having a husband with whom we share a common vision, but I found pain from a teenage son running away. And I had to let go and let God as he went through many challenges in his life. I felt the joy of seeing my older son find sobriety and then went through grief over his accidental death 2 years later. You know, it was the love of the fellowship that embraced us through these challenging times. And we found divine strength beyond our own in the face of difficulty. I also learned the great purpose of guarding unity within our fellowship and the challenge of finding joy amidst the drudgery of a common day. My success today isn't based on the absence of problems, but it's based on the presence of power. And it's the power I find in our way of life, our spiritual principles of living, and through our loving fellowship, the fellowship of the Spirit. When I began to seriously take that 12th step, carrying the message to those who suffer, and found when I'm on the giving end of you, I find myself on the receiving end of God. And I had a lot of spiritual journeys along the way. One of them was in the area of relationships and being able to give that to God. And I remember at one point I decided to just, no one told me to do this. I just decided on my own. I was just going to give up that area of my life. I was going to stop looking for a husband, and I was going to look for a relationship with God, for more intimacy. And I went through a period of time where I regained so much dignity and integrity and spirituality. And I remember sitting down and saying, I'm not looking for love, but just in case, God, I wrote this letter. I wrote this letter to God, and I described the exact kind of a man that I wanted. And it was a man who first loved God, a man who could be a good father to my young son. I wanted a man who loved music, because I love music too. I wanted a man who could pull his weight, because I had had a few bums eating me out of house and home. And, they wanted a relationship with me, but they didn't want the full package, the little boy as well, and things weren't going well. So, I just wrote this letter about, everything I wanted. And the day came when I picked up my guitar. I went out of the house, went to a little coffee shop where they had an open mic. And there's Dave, the man I ended up marrying. And he's singing, and he's playing the harmonica, and he's singing songs about God. And I watched him afterwards go and pray with people. It was kind of amazing. I mean, sometimes I'd watch him, and there's this big old biker with chains and leather coats, and Dave's holding his hands and praying with this dude, and tears are streaming down the guy's face, and Dave can't see it, but I thought he could probably feel it. And I went over and I introduced myself, and I asked him, do you really believe in God, or do you just like to sing about him? And Dave said, oh, I believe. And it was that day that we began a friendship, and 2 years later we married. And I began to see that I had found a man who had incredible insight, a fire to carry the vision of God, a lot of compassion, wisdom, and faith. Dave is everything he appears to be. And I guess we have been married about 31 years now. And I can say it's nothing more than supernatural what God has put in our relationship. We are just you know, marching together in a way that I have never experienced before in my life. I guess God got my letter because Dave is everything I asked for and more. But I also know that if it had been God's will for me to live a life, He would have given me the strength and peace to do so. That's the way God is. Someone asked me once, can you give up who you want to be for who God wants you to be? And my experience is that God can turn what was meant for bad into something good. And through it, there will be a gift. I had a very powerful experience with the loss of one of my sons. Not the one who's in heaven now, but my other son. He disappeared for many, many years, about 10 years all told. And I think the grace is that I didn't know it was going to be 10 years. But I lived one day at a time. And many times I questioned God. I had to go through a period of deeper and deeper levels of surrender, acceptance, gratitude, trust. I mean, it was God's graduate class of letting go during that time of my life. The 12 and 12 says, pain is the touchstone of growth on which our character is carved. And one day at a time, I continued to face deep grief, sadness. There was nowhere to turn but to God. And it was during this time that I put our program to the test. I immersed myself in service, and God would show up every single day as I exercised gratitude in action. And all of this transformed me. Bill wrote one day that he mused when enchanted by a starlit night. Who made all this? That feeling of awe and wonder was fleeting and soon lost. And I had a night like that where I am looking up at the stars and I'm thinking, I'm feeling lost. I'm feeling the dark night of the soul because it's been so long since I'd seen my son. And that was the night that I just looked up at the stars and I said, God, give me a sign. Am I going to be with my son again one day? And I very specifically said, I want to see in your night sky 3 stars. Show me those stars so I'll know. And, this happens sometimes where we get a sign from God. And it's the kind of sign that God puts a promise in your heart to confirm that something is going to happen. And the sign gives you, strengthens your faith, and it encourages you. It might be something really small that means nothing to anyone else. And it might be in a dream. Could be very personal, but it's God saying, stay the course. I'm with you. Well, I saw my 3 stars. They were right there. I don't know if anybody else saw them, but I did. I saw them not just once, but twice. And I kept that secret of God's promise through those stars for many, many years. And one day that promise came true. Like a butterfly coming out of the darkness of a cocoon, there's kind of a spiritual light that shines forth when that secret that once was just between you and God comes true. Because it was about 10 years ago, the phone rang, and my son's voice was on the other end. It wasn't a 19-year-old teenager. That was the last time I saw him. It was a 29-year-old young man. And we talked, and we caught up. And he told me about everything that he was doing, going to the University of Texas, winning awards in writing and photography, performing live music, and wanting to help others to live a better life. And in all this time that we spent reconnecting, I also found that he had some serious things happen in his life. and things that helped him to become a stronger person, one more committed to living a very meaningful life. And it was hard to listen to him talk about these things because he went through a lot of pain to get to be who he was today. I know if I had been part of that, it would have been really hard for me. My mother's heart would have broke over that. I wouldn't have been able to handle it. And in the 10 years that I was away from him, I had experiences that made me into the kind of person that could interact and love and help and have the kind of connection with my son that I'm able to have today. There were some challenging years together. There was a lot of drama and a lot of transformation. But today, my son and I have an ongoing, healthy, happy relationship. And he shares all of his dreams and fears and accomplishments. And God made everything beautiful in his time. And I don't question God now because I knew that God had a plan. That I had to transform, and my son had to transform. And I was equipped to deal with what came later. And it took a lot of courage and hope and prayer, learning to love in new ways, accepting the hurts of the past and the allies of the future. But that dream came to pass. And it's been 10 years since then, since we first reconnected. And I thought, you know what? Things are so awesome today. He is a transformed, healthy, happy, wonderful person living his dreams. And I am too. And I said, God, it is time. I'm going to commemorate your promise of those stars. And I went and put them on my wrist. Those 3 celestial groupings are right there. And it is God's promise come true. And, I brought them home. A reminder of God's love and power. The Big Book says the age of miracles is still with us. And our 3rd step prayer says it is now our job to make an invisible God visible to all. And we begin to let God demonstrate and give evidence of that love and power beyond a shadow of a doubt what he can do. We are agents of God's power and love. And I see that in every AA story, in every AA prayer, in every AA meeting. Lack of power is no longer a problem for many of us today. So I'm going to close here with something else Bill said that I love. It came out of his the latest book, Our Great Responsibility. And that is our responsibility to the next suffering alcoholic that comes in the door and our great fellowship. Bill said, God in his wisdom has granted us 3 precious graces: freedom from a deadly affliction, a life experience that enables us to carry this priceless freedom to others, and a vision of God's reality and love. And so I hope we can continue to live in that thoughtful contemplation of the goodness and grace of God in our fellowship and in recovery, and keep those doors open and our hearts open for people like me to find people like you. So thank you and God bless.